Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Amazing to have this young lady back. She is one of the best journalists I've ever seen in my life, and I learned a lot from her as I was in journalism. It's Lara Logan. Lara, how are you? Good to see you again.
You're awesome, Joe. Thank you so much.
You know, the work that you're still doing to this day, A, you haven't aged. I don't get it. B, these stories are so amazing, and it's truly the same journalism you've always done. But something seemed to happen where journalism left you. It wasn't like you left journalism. Is that a good way to characterize it? Journalism changed, but you kept doing the job.
That is a good way to characterize it. Also, because people try to say, oh, she became some right wing crazy or whatever. No, I didn't. I just followed the facts wherever they led me. And I didn't care about the ideology. Like, I would be reporting what I'm reporting regardless of who's in power. For me, it's not about who's in power, and it never has been. But
Right.
when you're the ones that are orchestrating, a campaign to destroy the credibility of the media or all the many other things that we're looking at today, I'm going to call that out. And unfortunately, what I discovered when I did that was that the world I lived in wasn't real. It was really kind of fake in a way, because we thought we were all shoulder to shoulder in the trenches fighting for honest, independent journalism. And when it came down to it, I think these powers that had been sort of in the shadows, they really moved to kind of take over. And there was no room for people like me anymore.
Did that start, Laura, do you think, with Woodward and Bernstein, who, by the way, weren't very good journalists at all? They were just handed the stuff from the number two guy at the FBI, and they reported on it. Did it start with them when they said, hey, we can get rid of a president if we say words?
Probably started before that, Joe,
Really?
right? Yeah, I mean, if you look at JFK, right, a lot of things go back to JFK. I mean, the things that he talks about in his speeches, the things that he was fighting against, those are the same things that we face today. I mean, JFK was not unlike Trump in the sense that he said, I'm going to go after the deep state, right?
Right.
And they killed him. And so if you look at it throughout history, if you look at the example of Gary Webb, there was a motion, a film that was made. It wasn't a documentary film, it was a feature film
Right.
that was made about Gary Webb. I think it was called To Kill the Messenger.
Okay.
And Gary Webb was an amazing journalist at the San Jose Mercury Herald who wrote about, investigated, and did a whole series called Dark Alliance that was about the CIA introducing crack to the streets of America, and particularly in black neighborhoods,
Right.
right? I mean, the CIA was behind the crack epidemic in America. And you know how much damage that has done, especially to black communities, but all over this country. And so Gary Webb was, he got the Pulitzer. He was held up as a great journalist until the CIA started running a shadow campaign against him. And of course, his colleagues in the media were all too eager to take him down, and they stripped him of everything. He finally, committed suicide, so-called, with 2 bullets to the head. And in his book that he wrote before he died, he wrote something, I don't remember, I'm paraphrasing now, but he wrote this about, I was really, I was grooving along, and I was judging journalism contests, and I was winning awards, and he really had it all. And then he writes, and then I realized how sadly misplaced my bliss had been. And it wasn't that I was so good at my job and so on. He said it was just that I'd never written anything important enough to suppress. And I think that's what I came up
What a
against when I did
statement.
my
Yeah.
Benghazi story, and my story on Al Qaeda and others at 60 Minutes that I did that angered the powers that be at the time.
It's Lara Logan. Go and follow her over at Lara Logan just about all the social media. She's doing incredible journalism to this day, and you've got to see everything that she does. I retweet everything that you do because I love it. And also
Thank
go
you.
support her, laralogan.locals.com. You can do that as well. But make sure you're following her on X. That seems to be the next bastion of free speech, although I still have some questions about it. But
Yeah.
having said that, when you talk about journalism and the deep state going after them to shut them up, it appears as though just about everybody that I would qualify as big media has joined the deep state. And then we saw something last night that changed completely when Biden walked out. And I want to get into that in a second. But let's talk about Tucker Carlson. I think Fox News is kicking itself for letting him off leash. When they had him for an hour a night, they could control him. Now he's interviewing Putin for 2 hours, and they could do nothing about it. So let's talk about the lead up to that. I saw Christiane Amanpour, who I met once at CNN, who is quite the person, to be honest. I saw her post that all the news outlets have requested an interview with Putin. He has said no to all of us, which I'm not really sure I believe. I think Christiane Amanpour, like Lara Logan, could probably get any interview she wants. Christiane Amanpour, I don't think, wanted the interview. But having said that, all of the media, said he was a traitor for doing it. Then it came out that Stephanopoulos interviewed Putin, and then, of course, you had Charlie Rose interviewed Putin. We had, down the line, Barbara Walters interviewing Putin. So they had a switch when they said, oh, crap, we did do this. Then they said, yeah, but he's only giving it to Tucker Carlson because Tucker's in his pocket. He's a Putin puppet, and Tucker's a big fat lying liar. Before we ever saw moment one of the interview. What did you think about all that? What was the media doing? Were they freaking out because they didn't do the job, or were they freaking out because he was going to expose their agenda by talking to this guy?
Well, that's a very good question. What surprised me about it was that all of those journalists out there, I don't care what they say publicly. They know in their hearts that it's our job always to hear from other people and to hear what they have to say, to try to pass this off as if Tucker's interview is somehow illegitimate because he's not going to do a real interview. That's ridiculous. I mean,
Right.
how many of them have done real interviews with people like Zelensky? I mean, one of the worst things I have ever seen in my life was Erin Burnett's from CNN, her interview with Zelensky, which was just ridiculous.
100%.
I mean, that didn't even pass for journalism, right? That was just sycophantic, honestly, BS.
Yes.
So how these people can stand up and say, well, we're allowed to interview Vladimir Putin because we're going to do a good job, but they're not allowed to. That's ridiculous. Since when was that the standard? That's like saying, well, we as CNN are allowed to interview George Bush, but you can't, Fox News, because you're not going to give him a hard enough time. What? I mean, that's like MSNBC interviewing Joe Biden. Are they really going to give Joe Biden a hard time? Are they really going to, play him a video of all his mistakes and say, come on, this is more than just an error. This is dementia. No,
Right.
I mean, and that's what you should be doing right now. So, I mean, this idea that only certain people, depending on what they do, are allowed to interview certain world leaders, you start to see the slippery slope we're on, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
just honestly, I don't know if I can say horse shit on your show, Joe.
No,
But
I'll
I'm
have
gonna say
to I'll have to take that out. But go ahead.
okay. That is all right. I'll put it there. That is BS. Okay. That is just
Right.
absolute nonsense. And people see through that. If you're really clinging to that as your justification for why Tucker Carlson can't go and interview Vladimir Putin and claim that as a legitimate part of journalism, then you really have lost your way. You're so
Yes.
ideologically blinded at this point, you've forgotten what journalism is at its core. And the other thing that I would just say, this idea that we've all requested interviews with Putin and he's refused. Well, first of all, maybe Christiane has requested, and maybe Tucker Carlson, maybe Putin's people said no because they knew that Christiane Amanpour wasn't going to be an honest broker. I mean, Putin has the right, like any world leader, like anyone at all, whether you're a world leader or just an ordinary person being interviewed, you have the right to say no.
Yes.
And I mean, I tried to interview Putin when I was at 60 Minutes, and we were in talks with one Dmitry Peskov, who's his main person who handles most of his media, and we wanted to do something more challenging than just a sit-down interview. We wanted to spend a few days with Putin, and we wanted to see how he really functioned and what he did. And this was more than 10-15 years ago, right? This is before anybody could say, oh, if you did anything with Putin, you were a traitor. And we didn't get there, and so that door hasn't closed completely, but we didn't get there.
Right.
I mean, honestly, when I saw that Tucker had Putin, I was thinking, damn it, I wish that was mine, right? I wish it was me. Didn't you?
Lara, when I was a television news anchor, and I actually was a journalist for a long time, and as you know, I've won a lot of AP awards for excellence in journalism. I know how to do it. I was always competitive with everybody else. I'm exactly who you are. I wanted that interview. I wanted to break that story. I wanted to get the accolades for doing a really good job. And I wanted my audience to get what I wanted to bring them. But what really jumps out at me about this specific situation is 2 days earlier, everybody in the big media said it's traitorous to go and interview Putin. And then
Outrageous.
when it was about to happen, they all said, we all tried to interview Putin. So were they all trying to be
Yeah,
traitors, or do they
exactly.
think they were stupid?
They think we're stupid. They do. I know that for a fact because the number of times, if I had a penny for every time somebody around me said something disparaging about the audience and how stupid the audience is and how we have to dumb it down for the audience. And I remember my boss at 60 Minutes saying once, never underestimate the audience. And I thought a lot about what he meant by that.
Right.
How come everyone in the industry, not just at 60 Minutes, but all across the industry, was so disparaging about the audience? And here's the executive producer of 60 Minutes, and he's saying the opposite. So I really, paid attention, and I figured out it's not that hard, right? It's really simple. What journalists do is they equate somebody's lack of familiarity with the subject. Because if you're working, a full-time job or that doesn't involve staying connected to the globe,
Right.
maybe it's a blue collar job, maybe it's a white collar job. But if your entire life doesn't revolve around the news cycle, either personally or professionally, then you might not be familiar with the history of Shiite and Sunni Islam and exactly how that factors into the Iraq conflict, right?
Right. Right.
But that doesn't make you stupid. That doesn't make you ignorant. That doesn't make you incapable of understanding. And what you find is that this elitist mindset that is all across our educational institutions, especially the colleges, and all across the media, is actually was commonplace. It was commonplace in every newsroom I ever worked in. And now I realize that when they say flyover country, what they mean is throwaway country, right?
Yes.
Someone I was interviewing said that to me once. He said, I come from where I come from. He said, nobody cares what we think. Nobody cares about our lives. We're just throwaway people. And I realized, wow, what he's talking about is throwaway country. The
Yes.
throwaway people that live all across throwaway country. We don't matter to most of the media and to anyone of that elite mindset. And Christiane Amanpour is unfortunately no exception to that.
It's
These
true.
people look down on the great unwashed, right? The masses. They're so disparaging about them and they're so hypocritical. And right now, there's not a single journalist who has a single thing to say about Tucker Carlson that can come close to Tucker Carlson's reach. And he has
Exactly right.
earned that position with hard work, with integrity, with consistency, with talent, with intelligence. I mean, he's well informed and he's articulate and he's smarter than most of the media put together and multiplied, right? And he's not afraid. He hasn't backed down. And it hasn't always been going Tucker's way. He's been under pressure many, many times over the years. I know
Right.
Tucker personally, and he has stood his ground. His team has been harassed and abused just for working on his show. They've been through a lot together, and they deserve what they're getting now because they are doing what every journalist should be doing, and they're doing it the best they can, and they did a pretty damn good job.
I agree with you. And Laura, you hit something I think spot on, right on the head. Tucker Carlson is all those things you said, but plus he also has the ability to speak to us on any level. I've had him on
Mm-hmm.
my show, but when he first started the Fox show, he came on, and it was the most comfortable, friendly conversation I could ever have had. And I've had interviews with people that think very, very highly of themselves and think they're above me, and I felt that
Yes.
in the interview. But you are exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. This guy is very well educated. He is in
Mm-hmm.
the elite when it comes to journalism and broadcasting, and he treated me like we were friends. And I think it's why you and I hit it off
He
as well
treats
because
everyone like that.
well, exactly. You're very
Mm-hmm.
much the same person. You could easily say, look at all my accolades. Look at what I've achieved. Look at what I went through. Look at what the hell I went through for the story in Egypt. But you don't. You're a regular person who wants to make sure that I understand what it is that you worked so hard to get for me. And I think it's a lost art, isn't it, in journalism?
What you're saying, Joe, is 100% correct, and it's funny because I see it with my children. They treat everybody the same as well. So
Right.
now I'm outside looking at that characteristic, and if anything defines my life and my work, it's that people are equal to me. Like, I mean, of course, I'm going to respect you if you're the president of the United States or the president of Russia, whatever it
Right.
happens to be, or you're a commander in the middle of the war. I'm going to factor in those things into our conversation. But I am not intimidated by you because in the end, we are all people. And
Yes.
whether I'm sleeping on the streets of Angola with street kids, as I did, I don't know, when I was 19 or 20, or whether I'm, coming to the presidential palace to interview you, the pressure might be different, the stakes might be different, but the interview is going to be the same. I'm going to be the same. I'm going to treat you the same. I'm going to give you respect. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. I'm going to approach it with an open mind. I'm going to have done my homework. I'm going to follow up on everything that you say. I'm not just going to give you a free ride and give you a
Right.
free pass. You know what I mean? And I do that. I learned something great at 60 Minutes. My boss said to me once, you need to decide what kind of interviewer you want to be. And I thought, well, I'm the interviewer that I am naturally and instinctively. What does he mean? And he said, well, if you watch an Ed Bradley interview, Ed can ask anybody anything, and he never makes you pick a side. He wants the audience to listen to the answer. And
Right.
he made the contrast with Leslie Stoll. He said, Leslie, the way she comes at a person, you always know what Leslie thinks and where she stands. And so, which is your style? And I knew that I'm instinctively an Ed Bradley, right? I
Right.
love the man. I have always been like that. That's how I am naturally. I want as many people as possible to listen. So I learned how to ask people things in a way, like I could say to you, Joe, I'm really sorry to hear about the death of your child. Let's talk about some of the more difficult issues that I know have been on your mind. Or I could say to you, Joe, one thing that I've been meaning to ask you that I want to hear is, do you beat your wife? Have you ever hit her? And so
Such
when
a
I'm
stark
asking,
difference, isn't it? It's a stark difference.
yes, and, because I want the audience, if there's a valid reason for asking that question, I want the audience to have the opportunity to hear the answer. I'm not there to make you pick a side. I might have a side because after I've been through this investigative process or whatever, I've realized, wow, these are good people, these are not good people, this is the truth, this is not. But the process of journalism, how we go about our work, remains the same. And Tucker let Putin speak. He gave him latitude to speak. He interjected when he could, as much as he felt he could,
Right.
without offending someone of his stature. And people can, they can say whatever they like, but I've been in those shoes. I interviewed Obama when he was a senator, and he was on his first, run for president. And I interviewed him in Afghanistan. They offered me an exclusive. Now when I look back at it, I realized, why did they give me that exclusive? At the time I was flattered, and I just thought it was because my work was great. Now I realize, wait a minute, I was probably being used as well, because if anyone had foreign policy credentials at the time, I did.
Yes.
From the
Yes.
battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, there was probably nobody in television that could do more than I could with that opportunity. And doesn't mean I was the only good one, but they chose me for a reason. And I think it was because they knew that that would reflect well on a senator whose foreign policy credentials were non-existent at that point.
It gave him street cred. I'm guessing because he had no gravitas whatsoever on foreign policy. You're right, and it
None.
probably. But see, here's the thing: even if they had an agenda, you still did a great job with the interview, and I think that's what we've gotten consistently from you, and I think that we've gotten that consistently from Tucker Carlson as well. It's Lara Logan. Go follow her everywhere. LARALOGAN, the Lara Logan, the one that you watched on television forever. I don't understand how you look like this, but having said that, at the end of the day, watching. Well, let me give you a quick anecdote about Christiane Amanpour, if you don't mind. I was in New
Sure.
York filling in for Glenn Beck on Headline News. When Glenn had his Monday through Friday show, he would take a week off. I'd go do the show. So I'm in New York and I had to go to the edit bay and go do some sort of voice tracking for the promo in the beginning of the show. And
Yeah.
she was walking out as I was walking in. I knew who she was. I said, "Hey, how are you?" Laura, I promise you, she put a wry smile on, looked me up and down, and walked away. Now, I'm 6'1", 240, and she's 5'2", maybe, right? So I was very put off by that because I'm a blue-collar guy. My dad was a truck driver. I mean, I'm a guy that made pizzas for a living before I decided I would be in broadcasting. So
Yeah.
I don't look at people that way. So I felt that immediately. But I do want to go into Leslie Stahl a little bit. You, of course, saw that interview with Trump in the White House. You, of course, saw that Leslie Stahl sat down to tell Trump he's bad, he's no good, Hunter Biden's laptop is fake, and you're lying about it.
Yeah.
That's what her goal was. And she did that. And Laura, even after everybody from top to bottom, left and right, admit that it was Hunter Biden's laptop and all the stuff that's on there is real, she hasn't said a word. And I figured that somebody who's got some integrity would say, you know what? I jumped to conclusions in that, and he was right. It was real. Isn't that what it's about, having some integrity?
It is for you and I, Joe. I can't stress that strongly enough. That integrity has always been at the forefront. I'm not one of those people that said I can tell myself I'm a good person and treat my children and my family and my friends one way, but then behave completely differently when it comes to
Right.
my work. And and to I can mess people around and I can be dishonest and I can no, you've got to be consistent. I think it's one of the most underrated virtues that a person can have. And when it comes to integrity, it's funny you should say that because a lot of the time, especially when I was at 60 Minutes, but still today, I would get people coming and saying to you, my daughter, my niece, my cousin, whatever, wants to be a journalist. Basically, they want to be like you.
Right.
Can you give them a job? Can you give them some advice? And the one thing that I say is the one thing most of them don't want to hear. And it's never changed. I always say, who are you? Who are you? Do you know who you are
Right.
and what you stand for? Because I can find someone that speaks a foreign language. I can find another one that went to Columbia Journalism School. I can find all of those things, but I need people around me who put integrity before everything else. There's no story that you and I can do, no matter how powerful that story is, that is worth lying over, right? Or
100%.
lying to people or deceiving them. I mean, if somebody says to me, and I've done this before, why should I do this interview with you? How is this going to help me? I will be honest with them if it's the case and say, I don't, this helps me more than it helps you. I don't really think it helps you. And if I were in
Right.
your position, I might not do the interview either. But here are my reasons for wanting you to do it, and you see what you think. I've done that before and encouraged people even to walk away from interviews with me. Because what do you tell a father whose son just died of, sudden adult death syndrome? And he says,
Right.
is it going to bring my child back? And you say, no, it's not going to bring your child back. And if you're still in mourning and grieving and you don't want to do this, I understand. Right? So integrity is front and center for me, but it isn't for a lot of other people. And I would like to tell you that you cannot succeed in journalism without integrity, but that would not be honest because there's plenty of people who have succeeded in this business who have been held up, right, as being great at what they do, and they have no integrity whatsoever. But one thing I will tell you about Tucker Carlson,
Yeah.
the reason he's so big after leaving Fox, the reason they can't make him go away is that he's a man of substance. And what he is saying has substance. These people who are just plucked from obscurity and they're thrown out there, they're a dime a dozen. The Erin Burnett's of this world, even the Christiane Amanpours, even though Christiane distinguished herself at CNN, what has she really done since then?
Right.
I mean, everything she's done is incredibly forgettable. And gosh, I'm going to be attacked for saying that. They're going to hate it, but they hate everything I say, so it doesn't really matter.
Right.
I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it to just to be disparaging of her for the sake of being disparaging, because I have a number of Christiane stories of my own,
Right. I'll
right?
bet.
And I was easily dismissed. But they haven't been able to get rid of me. They can't get rid of you. They can't get rid of us
They would love
because
to. They would love to.
they would love to, but they can't because what we're saying is true, and people recognize that. They know there's only one truth in spite of what they tell you, and people want the truth. They don't want to be
And
lied
that's
to.
that's the one thing. They would love to get rid of us because the audience understands that we're giving them the truth,
That's
that
right.
there is some integrity there. And the fact that
Mhm.
Tucker can get 150 million views on something, or that people will follow you wherever you go to go and ingest the journalism you do, that's a commentary to being a real person that's got integrity. One thing about Leslie Stahl, do you think even for a half a second she had a pang of guilt because she was completely exposed after that interview? Do you think she thought about it at all and went, man, I really screwed that one up? Or do you think that she's on a level in her own mind of with the elites that she doesn't care? Well, I did what I had to do, and half the country believed me.
This is what I would say. First, I would caution that I am not Leslie Stoll, right? And I'm
Understood.
not
Yeah.
I'm not in her circle, so I'm not talking to her. I would just be speculating. What I would say is that it's not only Leslie Stoll. If you look all across the media, what about the journalists who got Pulitzer Prizes for their Russia collusion stories,
Yes.
for something that never even happened? I mean, for every Leslie Stoll, there's 100, maybe 200 other journalists out there who all owe the American people an apology, not to
Yes.
mention every person that reported on Carter Page and painted him out to be a traitor when he was actually someone who was serving his country. All the people who reported false information knowingly on Mike Flynn, who continued to, report false information on Donald Trump. I mean, people
It's a
don't want
very
to
good
say
point.
that because I'll get accused of being a Trump supporter. But how many thousands of stories about Donald Trump have been 100% false? Not 80%, not 90%, but 100%
And they've
false.
never retracted even one, I don't think.
No, you get one writer at the Washington Post, a media writer that says, "Oh, maybe we weren't right about everything," and they try to just, shift the ground. No, you were wrong. You were
Yes.
100% wrong about what you reported year after year after year, and it's been proven and acknowledged now. You can't even lie about it, and you still won't be honest with the American people.
It's
So that's
stunning.
one part. But the other part, to answer your question, is I don't think that any of these people are willing to acknowledge even to themselves that how dishonest they have been and how much they've been used. Right? Because if they were, we would have seen that. You would have seen some kind of mea culpa. Instead, what you see is them doubling down. I look at their actions. I can't read their minds, and
Right.
I can't tell you definitively what's in what every person thinks and believes. But I can tell you that with their actions, they would not be taking the position on Tucker Carlson that they are, or on the
Yes.
position with Joe Biden. Look at them spinning themselves into knots to try to justify how the special counsel can come out and say this person committed a crime, but they lack the mental acuity to stand trial. I've heard people say, "Oh, but the case would take too long, and in a few years." No, they said today, right
Yes.
now, he lacks the mental acuity to stand trial, which means he lacks the mental acuity to lead the Boy Scouts, let alone a nation,
Right.
right? And yet they cannot bring themselves to say it. They just can't. You've got people like, Bill Maher, for example. He's an interesting character to me
He
because I
is.
don't agree with everything he says and does. But Bill Maher comes out there and says, "Hey, you know what? They were lying about the vaccines. They were lying about COVID." And there's other things that he has exposed and talked about. And look what happens to their careers when they do that, right? They get punished.
Yes. Relegated into obscurity for sure. It's Lara Logan, LaraLogan, Lara Logan, over on X, and go follow her on lauralogan.locals.com. Every
And the
bit of
rest of the
journalism,
story with Lara Logan is my show.
the
The
rest of the
rest of
story
the
with Lara
story.
Logan, go in
Yeah.
and get that right now. You got to see everything that she does. The work is better than ever, I believe, and I love that you're still doing it. I don't have a lot of time left, but I want to talk about the style of the interview last night. When I interview somebody, like I've been interviewing you for a while now, today, and I've
Hmm.
listened to most of what you said because I'm very interested in what you have to say about the questions that I ask. But in watching last night, I don't know if I have it in me to sit there for 30 minutes and hear Putin go through a history lesson. I'm not saying what Tucker did was bad or wrong. It was great. I couldn't
Yeah.
stop watching it. But as an interviewer, just come to me from that perspective. Could you have sat there and listened that long? Because again, I think what Tucker did was great and it was his style. I couldn't have done it. I'm sort of that guy that keeps it on track and keeps asking the questions. How did you feel about the style of it?
So everybody has their own style,
Yes.
right? As we've talked about. And that's one thing. The other thing is you're talking to the wrong person because I've done 3, 4, 5 hour interviews for 60 minutes, right? I did that for years and years and years, and I'm still doing it for the rest of the story
Right.
with Lara Logan. So, for me, I would have been fascinated by what Putin was saying, really riveted because I love that history. And anyone who follows, for example, Victor Davis Hanson,
Right.
you will be familiar with that history. Of course, hearing it from Putin himself is very interesting. And, there are things that I would have done differently to Tucker, but could I have sat there and listened to that? 100%. I will say one thing that factors into that interview that most people probably underestimate is the translation, right? Because what you have to
Yes.
remember, you're seeing it in real time. Kind of those two things are happening simultaneously. Putin is speaking. There's a little bit of a lag for the translation, but you're getting it in real time. Whereas Tucker is sitting there, Putin's getting the question translated in real time because you saw the earpiece he had.
Yes.
But then Tucker wasn't wearing an earpiece. So I'm not 100% sure how he was getting it translated back to them. But those things really build and create time. So on the one hand, it's good because you can think about what they're saying and you can think about your follow-up question and where you're going next. And you can formulate that question in your mind. But on the other hand, if you thought that was a long time to wait watching the interview, I promise you in real life, it took even longer. And I am very familiar with that. I interviewed a man in Iraq once, Hadi al-Amri, the leader of the Badr Corps. And it was a very difficult interview. It was a very dangerous interview. He got really angry when I said to him, a few things. He accused me at one point of being CIA, which was laughable.
Wow.
I said, what do you think? Only the CIA knows how to ask real questions? I mean, that's how I responded to that. That was a joke. But I ended the interview. I saved this question to the end because I had a feeling it wasn't going to go well. I could never have foreseen how badly it went. But I looked him in the eye and I said, I want to read you from a cable that an American ambassador sent from Baghdad to Washington a couple of years ago. And in it, the ambassador wrote that Hadi al-Amri has been personally responsible. I said, that's you. You've been personally responsible for the death of more than 2,500 Sunnis. And your preferred method of killing is to drill holes, as you like to drill holes in their heads while they're still alive.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. And I knew that was true. I had lived in Iraq and I had seen a lot of the bodies and I had covered this for years. I knew it was true. He killed many more people than that even. But, and he was an Iranian proxy, of course. But when I looked in his eyes, and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him and the translator is going and he's getting a colder and colder and colder stare. And then he looked at me and said, as I told General Casey and General Corelli, and he went through the list, he said, there's no evidence of that. And so I did this is why they called me the follow-up honey badger at 60 Minutes. I followed up with the all-important question, are you saying there's no evidence or are you saying that you didn't do it? Because those are two very different things.
Right.
And he looked at me and he got this kind of half smile on his face and he said, I'm telling you, I wouldn't hurt a fly.
Wow.
And then everyone in the room, our blood ran cold. I was not feeling well. I had thrown up in the middle of the interview. So I got up and I sat down on a sofa and I passed out. They interrogated our staff. They interrogated our local staff, our foreign staff. They canceled our 2-week embed all across the battlefield with their forces. They put a lot of pressure on us. They contacted us for days by phone. They threatened my team. They did a lot to stop that interview coming out because that was a very significant interview. Nobody dared before that moment ask a man who had personally been responsible for the death of thousands. I mean, what that cable was saying was that he had killed thousands. He was responsible for the death of many thousands more. And he did not like being challenged like that at all. And I can tell you, it's not an easy thing to do. So, Putin, you could see he was very much in command of that interview.
He was. And
what he wanted to say, how he wanted to present himself. And where there was that one moment when he said to Tucker about the CIA, he said, where you wanted to go, right? And he was letting Tucker know, oh, you think you did your homework for this interview? Well, I can promise you, my guys did their homework, and I'm prepared as well.
Yeah, we all sat up straight. When he said that, we all sat up straight and went, wow, this is going to be interesting. It's Lara Logan. The rest of the story with Lara Logan, go and follow everything she does, at Lara Logan on X, laralogan.locals.com. I could talk to you for 7 hours. You know that. Please come back again very soon. Thank you for giving me so much time today.
You're amazing. You really are. My mother-in-law is a big fan. She came over the other night. She said, I hear you're doing an interview on Friday. I was like, you got to be listening to Joe Paz.
well, tell her I said thank you. She's the one who's definitely listening. Laura, we appreciate you. Let's do it again soon, my friend. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Joe.
All right. We're back after this. Stay right here.